The Pacific had a way of tricking sailors into believing danger could never reach them on a day this beautiful. The water was a sheet of polished glass. The sky looked freshly painted, and the horizon sat perfectly still. If a man squinted long enough, he could almost imagine the world had stopped spinning entirely. That illusion was what made Petty Officer Mark Ellery uneasy. He wasn't a man easily shaken. After 20 years aboard different Navy ships, destroyers, cruisers, even a carrier, Ellery had seen enough calm days turn violent without warning. Storms didn't bother him. Waves didn't bother him. Even tension between nations didn't bother him. But silence bothered him. And that morning on the USS Beringer, the silence felt unnatural. He had just stepped onto the starboard deck, a mug of too-bitter coffee warming his hands, when a strange sensation crawled up the back of his neck. The ship hummed under his boots as always, but there was a tautness beneath the vibration, like a bowstring drawn back waiting to snap. Ellery paused by the railing, scanning the ocean. Nothing but glittering water stretching miles in every direction. No storm fronts, no ships, no aircraft trails, nothing. Still, his instincts whispered, something's coming. He looked up toward the white dome mounted near the bow, the phalanx close-in weapon system, the ship's last line of defense. The autocannon sat motionless, but the faint whir inside it had changed. Its radar head twitched slightly, as if sniffing the air. "Picking something up." "Are you?" Ellery muttered under his breath. He didn't get another second to wonder. A piercing alarm ripped through the morning. General quarters. General quarters, all hands to battle stations. Boots hit the deck instantly. Voices shouted orders. Hatches slammed. It was the unmistakable sound of a ship waking up for a fight. Ellery dumped the rest of his coffee into the sea and sprinted inside. This wasn't a drill. Drills never carried panic in the air. A young airman nearly collided with him on the ladder well. "Where are they coming from?" Ellery demanded. "Sky contacts multiple. Fast movers. How many? 3 confirmed. Maybe more." Ellery grimaced. That wasn't reconnaissance. That was an attack wave. By the time he reached the auxiliary engine room, the ship's heartbeat had changed. The Beringer was alive in a different way now, alert, bracing, tightening every muscle. In his headset, a flurry of voices screamed over one another. Bridge radar, contact confirmed, closing fast. EW reports, hostile targeting radar. We're being locked. Repeat, they have missile tone. Ellery clenched his jaw. Missile tone meant one thing: the enemy wasn't just looking. They were preparing to kill. Above him, the phalanx CIWS stirred, spinning up with a whine that vibrated through steel plates and into bone. Even sailors who didn't understand its mechanics felt the shift. The ship had gained a second heartbeat, and this one belonged to a predator. On the bridge, Captain Laird stood steady as the red threat markers multiplied on the radar display. He folded his arms behind his back, not out of calm but out of habit. Leaders didn't show fear, not when dozens of eyes watched their every move. "Range?" he asked. 42 miles, the tactical officer replied. "They're approaching at high subsonic speed. Hostile confirmation. They're painting us hard, sir." Captain Laird nodded once. The situation was already speaking for itself. "Authorize CIWS to track. Do not fire without command." "Aye, sir." He stared out the bridge windows at the empty horizon. The jets were still too far to see, but he could feel their intent. Some threats carried a weight even before they arrived. "Try hailing them again," he ordered. The radio operator switched frequencies. "Unidentified aircraft, this is USS Beringer. State your intentions immediately." Silence. He tried again. More silence. The jets were not coming for conversation. At 28 miles, the radar tech shouted, "Missile lock." "We're being targeted again." Captain Laird lowered his chin slightly. "No more time for diplomacy. CIWS to full autonomous mode. Weapons free." On the bow, the phalanx responded like a living creature released from a leash. The dome rotated with a swift, unsettling smoothness. Its internal radar pinged with rapid pulses. The 6-barrel gun beneath it spun once, warming up with a rising whir that sailors could feel in their teeth. Ellery sucked in a breath below deck. "I've heard that sound too many times," he whispered. "It's the sound of a fight starting before you're ready for it." The jets appeared on the horizon like dark flecks streaking across the sky, slicing the clean line between air and ocean. They weren't wobbling or hesitating. They were in attack formation. 3 confirmed aircraft CIC called, possibly 5. They're not responding to hails. Do they have a firing solution? Laird asked. Sir, they fired. 2 bright flashes erupted from the lead jet's wings, missile trails arcing toward the Behringer. Laird didn't hesitate. CIWS, engage. The order was barely out of his mouth when the autocannon screamed to life. The phalanx fired at 6,000 rounds per minute, a roar so monstrous it sounded like the air itself was being shredded. Tracer rounds lit the sky in a continuous stream of glowing metal. All across the ship, sailors felt the deck shake. Ellery grabbed a railing as the steel around him vibrated like thunder. "That's it," he murmured. "Do your job, girl." Above him, the autocannon ripped the first missile apart mid-flight. One instant, there was a deadly spear rushing toward the ship. The next, it was a cloud of fire and debris scattered by tungsten. Before the smoke cleared, the gun swiveled and obliterated the second missile. 2 inbound threats neutralized, CIC reported. But the danger was far from over. The jets adjusted formation and dove low, committing to a closer attack. They were going to attempt something much deadlier, a straight gun run. The captain's voice was steady, but a hint of ice threaded through it. "They're going for close quarters, closing to 3 miles. The jets opened fire streams of cannon rounds, flashing from beneath their wings. The sound of their guns reached the ship a second later, sharp and violent. But the autocannon reacted faster than any human could. It snapped toward the incoming fire and unleashed a blistering counterstream. The tracers collided mid-air, sparks raining across the ocean. Then, with an almost unbearable screech, the phalanx locked onto the lead jet. What happened next was shockingly fast. The jet didn't explode. It simply broke apart, sliced by a torrent of tungsten so dense and so precise that the aircraft folded mid-flight, wings shearing off before the fuselage spiraled into the sea. 1 hostile down, CIC confirmed. Captain Laird didn't allow a flicker of relief. Where are the others? 2 remaining, splitting formation. The enemy jets separated, one diving low along the waves, the other banking high toward the sun. Classic flanking maneuver. They hoped to overwhelm the autocannon by attacking from opposite angles. But the phalanx wasn't human. It didn't get overwhelmed. It simply calculated. The high jet was closer to missile range, so the cannon chose it first. It rotated upward and unleashed another blistering storm. The aircraft tried everything, rolling, diving, accelerating. Nothing worked. The autocannon carved through its fuselage, sending it spiraling in flames toward the ocean. Splash 2. Only 1 jet remained, and it was already roaring in low, skimming the surface of the water like a thrown stone. It fired another burst of cannon rounds, but it never came close enough to matter. The phalanx caught it in the final seconds, a torrent of rounds punching through its structure until the aircraft tore open like a crushed can and slammed into the sea. Then silence fell. Not the ominous silence from earlier, not the tense silence of anticipation, but a clean, relieved silence, the kind that comes only when danger has passed. Ellery let his hand drop from the bulkhead. "That's all of them," he whispered. But something bothered him. Attacks this deliberate, this coordinated, this sudden. He'd lived long enough to know battles like this didn't begin and end so neatly. And as the Behringer settled back into the calm rhythm of the sea, he felt the same unsettling whisper creep back into his bones, like the ocean itself was warning him that the day wasn't finished with them yet. The ocean had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet from earlier that morning. It was a heavier stillness, the kind that came after something violent had passed through and left the air searching for its balance again. The sun hung high now, stark and bright, glinting off pieces of debris still floating on the surface of the Pacific where the jets had fallen. Ellery stood with one hand pressed against the bulkhead, the last tremors of battle still humming through his bones. He heard footsteps pounding down the corridor, voices crackling on the radios, the sharp metallic ring of tools from damage control teams checking the hull and superstructure. But underneath all that noise was something else. A faint tension, like a wire pulled just tight enough to mean trouble wasn't finished. He lifted his headset. "Bridge, this is auxiliary. Do we have a sit rep?" The reply came after a beat strained. "We're assessing. Remain at condition yellow." Condition yellow was the Navy's polite way of saying, "We're alive, but don't get comfortable." Ellery glanced at the overhead lights. They flickered once as the ship rerouted power from weapons back into standard operations. He grabbed his toolbox, slung it over his shoulder, and started up the ladder well. He knew what he needed to see the sky again, to breathe something that wasn't recycled air, to know for himself if they were alone. When he stepped onto the deck, the wind hit him first, cool, sharp, slicing through the humid press of the lower decks. Sailors moved across the deck in urgent groups, scanning the horizon, checking equipment, pointing out bits of floating wreckage. The smell of burnt cordite lingered like a ghost, and there she was, mounted near the bow, the Phalanx autocannon, its barrel still faintly smoked from the beating they'd delivered moments earlier. The white dome glistened in the sun like an eye that had seen too much and was already ready for more. Ellery approached it subconsciously, not to touch it strictly off-limits during combat readiness, but to look. To reassure himself that the metal sentinel hadn't suffered damage. The thing had saved their lives twice already that morning. As he stared, he noticed something odd. The radar head moved again. Slow, small, subtle, like it was listening. Picking up something else, he murmured under his breath. He didn't believe the day was done. He didn't think the ocean believed it either. Before he could speak another word, a voice from the ship's loudspeakers snapped the deck to attention. All hands stand by, new radar contacts detected, possible inbound threats. The sailors around Ellery froze for half a second, then scrambled back into motion. Ellery looked back at the horizon, squinting. What now? Inside the Combat Information Center, Captain Laird leaned forward over the radar display. New red blips appeared, smaller but faster than the jets they'd just fought. The radar tech's voice trembled despite his training. Sir, we have more inbound. Vector 203. Speed is extremely high. How many? Laird asked. At least 4, maybe more. They keep dropping altitude. Hard to track. A lieutenant spoke up from his station. Could be drones. High-speed strike drones. Laird's jaw tightened. Drones weren't less dangerous. They were sometimes worse. No pilot, no fear, no hesitation. Any missile locks. Not yet. Then they're positioning, Laird said quietly. He didn't like this. He didn't like it at all. Someone, some country, some group, something, had coordinated a multi-phase attack on a U.S. Navy cruiser in open waters. That kind of decision wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Weapons, he ordered, bring the CIWS back to full auto-ready. Manual stations on standby. Aye, sir. If they fire, Laird said, we fire first. He didn't add the rest. If they get close enough, the Phalanx may not save us this time. Ellery was halfway across the deck when the drones broke the horizon. They were small, about the size of compact cars, but their speed made his stomach drop. Their silhouettes cut jagged lines through the air, black and sharp like shark fins. Then he saw something that made his hair stand on end. Each drone had a snub-nosed pod mounted beneath its body. Short-range strike pods. The kind used in saturation attacks, swarm tactics. Damn it, Ellery whispered. They're trying to overwhelm us. A young seaman next to him swallowed hard. Can the Phalanx handle that many? Ellery didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. The autocannon could track dozens of threats at once, but real-world physics had limits. Ammunition could run low. Barrels overheated, sensors lagged under intense clutter, and 4 drones were often just the beginning of a swarm. He gripped the railing as the ship's alarm blared again. Inbound air threats. Brace for impact. All hands secure yourselves. The crew rushed to tether loose equipment. The wind picked up. The sun seemed to dim behind a thin veil of tension, and then the first drone fired. A streak of light shot from its underside, fast, white-hot, slicing through the air toward the Behringer. The Phalanx didn't wait for an order. It screamed. The cannon spun to life with a sound halfway between a roar and a chainsaw, unleashing a torrent of rounds that tore the sky apart. The tracers hit the incoming projectile, shattering it into fragments before it reached half the distance. But another missile launched. Then another. And another. The sky became chaos. The autocannon swung with impossible speed, slicing each missile midair, breaking them apart like clay pigeons exploding in a shotgun blast. But between the explosions and smoke, Ellery saw one drone break formation and dive low. It was trying to slip beneath the radar arc, and the CIWS hadn't swiveled to catch it yet. "Bottom left," Ellery shouted instinctively, as if the cannon could hear him. "It's going under you." The drone accelerated, its wings folded inward, aerodynamic surfaces locking into attack posture. Its pod opened a second missile, dropping out engine igniting instantly. This one was too close, too fast, too low. The CIWS whipped downward, but Ellery could see the truth: its barrel angle wouldn't reach low enough in time. "Move!" someone yelled behind him. "Everybody get down!" The missile streaked toward the hull in a bright, horrifying arc. And then something happened Ellery had never seen before. The autocannon, unable to depress low enough, tilted fully to the side, reorienting itself with a violent swing. And instead of aiming directly at the missile, it aimed at the water. It fired. The rounds hit the surface like invisible meteors, carving a trench into the ocean, a precision-adjusted ricochet path designed to bounce upward. The bullets skipped off the water like flat stones and struck the missile dead on. The explosion was so close that the heat burned Ellery's eyelashes. A geyser of seawater shot skyward. Sailors hit the deck. The concussion rattled teeth. Ellery lay flat, chest heaving. Someone near him muttered, "That was impossible." But Ellery shook his head slowly. No, that was the phalanx doing what it was built to do. He pushed himself up as the autocannon kept firing more drones, diving more rounds, filling the air with streaks of fire. The drones were fast, but the autocannon was faster. One drone banked left too slow. A stream of tungsten skewered it, splitting it open midair. Another tried diving gone before its nose touched the waves. A third climbed straight upward, then folded in half under a relentless burst. The smoke over the ocean grew thicker, turning the sky into a battlefield haze. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was barely 90 seconds, the last drone made a desperate attempt to flee. It rolled engines screaming, trying to climb back toward cloud cover. The phalanx tracked it. The barrel spun, and the drone vanished into a cloud of burning fragments. Then silence again. Real silence. But this time no one mistook it for peace. The cleanup began quickly. Damage control reported minor exterior scorching and a few cracked panels, but nothing critical. No one was injured beyond bruises and ringing ears. Captain Laird stood on the deck now, staring at the burning smear on the horizon where the last drone had fallen. Ellery approached him, sweat and smoke streaking his face. "Hell of a morning," Ellery said. The captain grunted. "You could say that." "You think that's the end of it?" Laird didn't answer directly. "Someone tested us today. Someone wanted to know if we'd break." Why, Laird's eyes hardened. "Because breaking a U.S. Navy cruiser sends a message, and failing to break one sends a different message." Ellery nodded slowly. "And the phalanx sent the loudest message of all." The captain almost smiled. "Almost. It saved us," he said quietly. Again, Ellery looked at the autocannon, its barrel smoking, its sensors slowly powering down. "Damn thing's alive, sir." "It's alive because good people keep it that way," Laird replied. Ellery didn't blush, not his style, but he looked away. The crew gathered around now, cleaning checking systems, securing equipment. Voices rose in stunned disbelief. Jokes started forming as nerves settled. Laughter appeared in cracks where fear had been. And in the middle of the group, the phalanx sat like a silent guardian, still, but humming faintly as if listening for threats no human could hear. As the afternoon stretched on, word spread through the ship stories of what the cannon had done. The low ricochet shot, the mid-air shredding, the split-second kills, the way it turned an overwhelming attack into a failed ambush. Watch how this U.S. Navy autocannon erased enemy jets before they could fire back. Someone said, shaking their head in awe. Someone else added, and drones, and missiles, and everything they threw at us. Ellery exhaled slowly. Damn right. Evening settled over the Pacific. The sky dimmed to a deep blue. The sea calmed again, almost too calm. The captain walked the deck one last time, checking on his sailors, offering nods, taking reports. He stopped beside the phalanx, resting a hand on the railing next to it. "We live to fight another day," he whispered. And for a moment he imagined the humming inside the dome answered him. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the ocean gold, the USS Beringer pushed forward, scarred, shaken, but unbroken. Behind her were wrecked jets, shattered drones, and torn waves. Ahead of her was more ocean, more sky, more unknown. But the crew walked with their shoulders higher, their steps steadier, because now they'd seen what their guardian could do. They'd watched it erase threats before those threats ever had the chance to strike. And somewhere deep in the ship, Ellery finally sat down, wiped sweat from his brow, and whispered to no one in particular, "Let them come again." He smiled tiredly. "We've got something waiting for them.